Quilty is brought to you by Baby Lock Sewing and Long Arm Machines. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Aurifil. Aurifil Italian thread, perfectly suited for all your quilting projects. Fairfield. Together, we can make beautiful things. Free Spirit. A new generation of creative and playful fabrics perfect for fashions, home decor, quilting, crafting, and more. Hovels Sewing. Cut it close with Hovels. Moda. Make something quilty with Moda fabrics. Thermoweb. Manufacturer of heat and bond adhesives and new luxe interfacings, proudly made in the USA. Hi out there, welcome to Quilty. I'm Mary Fons and I'm here with Linda Rainwater. Linda, welcome back.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks for having me.
It's been a little while since you were on the show.
Just a bit.
But we hang out a little bit.
Every once in a while.
Every once in a while, because you, tell me about your job.
Well, I'm the National Training Manager for Baby Lock Sewing Machines, which basically means that I get to teach our dealers about how to use our product so that all the customers who purchase it get the best experience possible.
That's pretty cool. And we have kind of like a third new friend on the set. Ta-da! We have a mid-arm quilting machine on the show now, the Tiara, which I have personally at home, and I love it.
It's a fabulous machine.
It's so great, and it fits in my condo. Ah! So I'm a quilting machine myself with my little mid-arm. But we're going to talk about thread today, and we're going to use this machine on another show and see it in action. But before you ever start quilting, you need to solve a major issue, and that's what thread do I use?
Right.
So we have some thread with us, and I want to ask you first of all, my first question about thread was, what is this weight stuff? What does 50 weight mean as compared to 40 weight? So what is thread weight?
Right. Thread weight can be like a very confusing issue because the numbers...
They weigh the same, right?
Right. The numbers are either going to be up or down, right? And so a lot of times, if you try to take what you know about, say, needle size for a sewing machine, you would assume that the heavier the needle is a higher size, right? So like a 20 size needle is a stronger needle as opposed to an 8, which is smaller. But when it comes to thread size, the thicker thread is the smaller number. So a 12
Why did they do
weight,
that to us?
I don't think they try to confuse us, but that is the way that the industry is. And so there are different weights of threads, and that will tell you a little bit about what is the most appropriate use for the thread based upon its weight.
Okay, what are some common thread weights?
Okay, so a common thread weight, like for example, if somebody is a machine piecer, most of the time they're going to go for a 50 weight thread for machine piecing. And part of the reason for that is because a 50 weight thread is going to be able to not take up as much in the seam allowance. Like when we talk about a scant quarter, it's easier to achieve that if you've got a thinner thread, 50 weights thinner.
Right, so when you're sewing your patchwork, when you fold your piece over and press it, that thread does take up a little bit of space in your patchwork, so you want a thinner thread so it doesn't take up so much space. If you had, like, say you were using your machine with pearl cotton, right, like almost like embroidery floss, that would be... You don't want to do that. It wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work.
Exactly.
It wouldn't even go through the needle.
But a really thick thread like that, like a floss, would not be good. Okay, so
Absolutely.
you use a 50, a thinner weight.
Right. For say, for example, for quilters, and that's who we talk to a lot on Quilty is quilters.
Absolutely.
The other type of thread that I think is a really good thread to have in your sewing room if you're going to be doing decorative stitching is a 30 weight thread.
Okay.
And a 30 weight thread is really nice because it does give a little bit more of a fullness to your decorative stitches and they'll look prettier.
Cool. So if you're doing applique, if you're doing like some funky applique and you want like a blanket stitch or something?
Absolutely. If you want to really make it look more hand wrought, right? So your machine can actually give a little bit more of a hand look finish if you've got a heavier thread. But now remember that if you're going to go with a thicker thread, you're going to also have to change your needle size to be appropriate. So the key for the needle is it actually puts a hole in the fabric thick enough so that the thread can go in and out of the fabric without getting distressed. So you got to have a hole big enough, and that's why they make different sizes of needles, and then the threads go along with it. So once again, when the first show I did with you was all about the recipe, we talked about that. This is a part of the recipe of sewing, is the appropriate size of thread and needle for whatever project you're doing.
Recipe, I like that. And then, so if you take it down a little bit further, I mean, 12 weight thread, whoa, that's really a big difference between 50 and 12. What's 12 weight thread for?
12 weight thread is very heavy. Actually, some of the types of sewing that I do with 12 weight thread is on my serger. because it does a nice job of overcasting if you're doing some narrow rolled hemming, or if you're doing flat locking or some stitching like that. But I think
That's
that
garment
the key,
speak, garment sewing speak, just in case you don't know.
Don't be afraid. It's actually a fun, part of the joy of having different threads is finding different ways of using them.
Absolutely.
And a lot of quilters like to add texture and dimension, and so couching or sewing over threads in order to be able to give more coloration, absolutely 12-weight thread, 30-weight thread. You can do so many different types of expressive things with thread.
And yeah, you can. Some people do thread painting, where they're just like doing all kinds of thread work on the top of their quilt. And you just said coloring, and we have some examples of variegated thread. So let's talk about some of the kinds of colors and things that exist.
So I think that that's part of the fun. Like whenever I'm quilting or sewing, what I try to do is match my project with the thread if I want it to be invisible. Like if I don't want the thread to really show up, then I'll try to match it exactly. But if you're looking for that pop, or if you're looking for something to really and truly complement the fabrics that you did, then a variegated thread, especially if you're new to machine quilting, really does hide a lot of your individual stitches so that everything looks good.
Right, hides a multitude of sins, we like to say.
Yes.
So if you have a pink quilt and you're new at machine quilting, go with some pink thread because it won't show up very much. If you're more experienced, or a lot of the modern quilters, there's lots of negative space in these quilts. If you have a big expanse of white in your quilt and you're very confident with your machine quilting skills, if you pick a blue thread, wow, and do some straight line quilting in blue thread on a white background, I mean, zowie, that could be pretty great. So so thread is a huge design element. I mean, I think some people think, whatever thread, but you will change the look of your quilt hugely. We had a really dark quilt in Quilty, lots of black fabric, and it was quilted with orange thread. And I mean, you almost saw the thread before you saw the patchwork. I mean, it was really distinctive. So it does make a difference. And and the variegated is kind of a happy medium, right, in between.
Absolutely.
Dark and light. Cool.
Absolutely.
Now, this set here, does thread come in sets like this a lot? Is it,
Well, certain companies will put together thread sets because it gives people a chance to go home and explore with a lot of different threads.
Got it.
But I will tell this, if the most important thing about thread is to know this, use a good quality thread. If you're going to spend time putting together a project that's going to cost you a lot of money in fabric, don't go cheap on thread. If it's on a wooden spool, it is absolutely, like an antique and it's a decoration. Display it proudly in your house.
Put it on a necklace.
But don't put it on your sewing machine, please.
It's good because, people have kind of a romance. Like they have this romantic notion about, grandma's dresses or grandma's silk scarves would make this great quilt. That's actually a really tough project to do, and you need some more advanced sewing skills to be able to stabilize those things and do that. And there's kind of a romance about some old spool of thread you found, and you can
just don't use it. Display it proudly. Just don't use it.
Don't use it. Now you mentioned making the quilting kind of invisible. We have a spool there. Do you just talk to me about invisible thread?
I'd love to talk to you about invisible thread. I mean, I think that invisible thread is a great opportunity for people to be able to really draw attention to the fabrics and then the resulting texture for quilting.
Cool.
But just remember, if you're going to wind it on your bobbin, make it really, really a slow speed when you're winding it.
Because it can heat up and melt?
No, the problem is it stretches really tight.
Wow.
And it might make it really kind of hard on your bobbin. So.
Wow. That's good to know. Invisible thread has come a long way, but it's still, you have to treat it differently from thread because it's not cotton.
Consult your instruction manual, always.
Always. You're my instruction manual.
Okay, call me anytime.
Linda, help me. Okay, I think we covered weight, we covered color, and we're going to talk about threading and all that on some other shows. So this was a really good primer. Thank you. And
my pleasure.
Try some different thread weights and play around on a scrap, just a little fake quilt sandwich. See what you like. And remember, the needle and the thread, they go together. So make that recipe work for you. Thanks for watching Quilty, and thanks for being on the show, Linda.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Quilty is brought to you by Baby Lock Sewing and Long Arm Machines. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Aurifil Italian thread, perfectly suited for all your quilting projects. Fairfield, together we can make beautiful things. Free Spirit, a new generation of creative and playful fabrics perfect for fashions, home decor, quilting, crafting, and more. Hovels Sewing, cut it close with Hovels. Moda, make something quilty with Moda fabrics. Thermoweb, manufacturer of heat and bond adhesives and new luxe interfacings, proudly made in the USA.